So, while everyone was busy talking about the biggest stars at the 2026 World Cup, a completely different name suddenly stole the spotlight: Gilberto Mora. If you're wondering who that is, you're not alone. Just days ago, most football fans outside Mexico had probably never heard of him. But then, this 17-year-old walked onto the field, made history, and instantly got people talking. In a matter of minutes, he broke a World Cup record that had been standing for almost 100 years and put his name alongside some of the biggest legends the game has ever seen. And now, one question is being asked all over the football world: who exactly is Gilberto Mora? And how did a teenager become one of the biggest stories of the World Cup? Well, it all started on opening night of the World Cup. Mexico was leading South Africa in front of a packed stadium when something caught everyone's attention. In the 65th minute, head coach Javier Aguirre turned to his bench and called on a teenager. The moment Gilberto Mora stepped onto the field, the crowd erupted. You could immediately feel that this wasn't just another substitution. This was one of those moments people would be talking about long after the final whistle. At just 17 years old, Mora became the youngest Mexican player ever to appear in a FIFA World Cup. And the crazy part? He wasn't just breaking any record. He was breaking a record that had been untouched since 1930. That's right, almost an entire century. Suddenly, fans who had never heard his name before were searching for him online, sports shows were talking about him, and social media was filled with the same reaction. Wait, who is this kid? But as impressive as that World Cup debut was, the truth is that Mora's rise didn't begin that night. It had actually been building for years behind the scenes. In fact, people inside Mexican football had been hearing about Gilberto Mora long before the rest of the world caught on. Born in 2008, Mora came through the youth academy at Club Tijuana, and almost immediately, coaches realized they were looking at someone special. Not because he was the fastest player on the field or the strongest. It was the way he played, the calmness, the confidence, the way he seemed to make the right decision over and over again. While most teenagers are still trying to earn minutes, Mora was already competing against grown professionals. And get this, he made his Liga MX debut before even turning 16 years old. That's the kind of thing that instantly gets scouts and coaches talking. Before long, he wasn't just viewed as a promising youngster. He was being called one of the brightest talents Mexico had produced in years. By the age of 17, he had already played more than 50 senior matches, which is honestly hard to believe when you think about it. But if that sounds impressive, what happened next took his rise to a completely different level. And that's exactly what happened in 2025. Suddenly, Mora wasn't just a talented kid playing club football in Mexico. He was starting to make headlines on the international stage. During the FIFA Under-20 World Cup, he helped Mexico reach the quarterfinals and caught the attention of fans far beyond his home country. The buzz around him kept getting louder, and eventually it became impossible for Mexico's national team coach Javier Aguirre to ignore. So Aguirre made a bold decision. He called up a teenager. Not only that, he handed Mora his senior debut, making him the youngest player ever to represent Mexico's national team. That's a lot of pressure for anyone, let alone someone who was still in high school just a few years earlier. But instead of looking nervous, Mora looked like he belonged. Then came another huge moment. In the Gold Cup semifinal against Honduras, he set up Raúl Jiménez with an important assist and helped Mexico on its way to lifting the trophy. At that point, it was becoming clear that this wasn't just another young prospect. Something special was happening. And then came the moment that introduced him to the entire world. And that moment finally arrived at the 2026 World Cup. In front of a packed Estadio Azteca with millions of fans watching around the world, Gilberto Mora stepped onto football's biggest stage. Just think about that for a second. Most 17-year-olds are worrying about school, friends, or what they're doing on the weekend. Mora was walking into a World Cup match wearing the Mexico jersey. But what made the moment even bigger was the history behind it. The second he entered the game, he became the youngest player at the entire 2026 World Cup. Not only that, he broke a Mexican record that had survived for 96 years. Suddenly, his name was being mentioned alongside legends like Pelé, Samuel Eto'o, and other teenage stars who made history at the tournament. That's some pretty incredible company for someone who only recently became a household name. And the crazy thing is, this story may still be just getting started. Because with more matches left to play, Mora has another record within reach, one that could make his World Cup debut even more unforgettable. Because believe it or not, breaking a 96-year-old record might not end up being the biggest achievement of Gilberto Mora's World Cup. If he manages to score in one of Mexico's remaining matches, he could become one of the youngest goal scorers the tournament has ever seen. That's the kind of record that instantly becomes part of football history. But even if that doesn't happen, Mora has already accomplished something most players can only dream about. In just a few months, he went from being a promising young talent in Mexico to one of the most talked about teenagers in world football. And that's what makes his story so fascinating. It doesn't feel like we're looking at a player who has reached his peak. It feels like we're watching the beginning of something much bigger. The records, the headlines, and the attention are all arriving incredibly fast. But so far, Mora seems completely unfazed by it all. And maybe that's why so many people are excited about what comes next. Because every World Cup introduces a new star to the world. And after his historic debut in 2026, many fans believe Gilberto Mora could be that player for an entire generation.